Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Appreciate you joining us. My name is Taya
Good
Diane.
afternoon.
I've been with TASK for 2 years, and I have Alexander Nagati with me. He is having some
Yes.
technical difficulty with his video, but he's here in voice. Alexander, you want to
Yes,
introduce yourself too?
Yes. Thank you, Taya. My name is Alexander Negedi. I've been responsible for fraud aspects in tax administration across Europe and Africa for SAS for the past 5 years. And prior to this, I spent 15 years working directly within tax administrations. Let's move into the agenda, Taya.
All right. And yeah, a little bit on my background. I've worked for state departments of revenue for my entire career prior to coming to SAS. Started out as frontline investigations, tax evasion, border imports, etc. So that's my history. So yeah, we'll go into the agenda.
Yeah, so in the agenda, we will go through the definitions of what is GenAI and compare to traditional AI in the context of tax agencies. We will go through examples of how to use GenAI in tax agencies and also setting up a roadmap to using GenAI, what needs to be done in tax authorities, what are the trends today, what are expecting the agents and the authorities, in order to prepare themselves and already put in place not just a governance, but also a structure and the right people and skills. So that's for the agenda. Yeah, so let's talk about the traditional artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is the science of designing systems to support and accelerate human decisions and actions. Maths have been invented for decades. Not only calculation means evolved the last decade to enable using AI efficiently and cost-effective. So AI systems perform tasks that normally require human intelligence. That is by Oxford definition. It is called artificial intelligence because it refers to the simulation of human intelligence in machines that are programmed to learn and in some way mimic the human thinking. So AI should not replace humans. It augments and accelerates what we do and how we do it, increasing overall efficiency and productivity. GenAI is a specific form of AI. You have many examples in visual perception, speech recognition, decision-making, comparisons, causes and effects, and translation interpretations. I leave you to explain more about GenAI.
Thank you, Alexander. So yeah, generative AI is a subset of traditional AI. You've probably heard a lot about it over the last year or two. GenAI has become a big thing at the forefront of today's focus, not merely as an advancement of artificial intelligence, but as a transformative technology that has the power to reshape how businesses and governments and humans innovate, operate, create, and deliver value. GenAI is an artificial intelligence method that learns from real-world data to generate new content. And this could be text, images, audio, code, video, tabular data with similar characteristics of the data that it is trained on. And that is key to what we're talking about specifically in the regulatory space. So think of traditional AI as a powerful analytics tool. It's going to find the patterns and insights within the existing data. Think of GenAI as this creative partner. It can enhance and learn and produce new things based entirely on historical knowledge and available data sets that it's pulling input from to provide the output that is new and novel. So on that, we're going to go into a couple different portions of the traditional AI, just to make sure that we're all on the same page on what we're talking about when we're talking about traditional AI versus Gen AI. It's, of course, designing a traditional AI or artificial intelligence as a whole. the science of designing ethical and transparent systems to support and accelerate human decisions and actions. That's key. The human element has to remain at the forefront of artificial intelligence as we use it. Generative AI goes beyond the machine learning and deep learning and generates new content. We're seeing this mostly now through natural language processing, but it can also be used for other things like art, etc. It's interesting to notice how it pulls from the data sets that it needs. We can control the data sets that it pulls from, and we'll go into that a little bit later, to provide a vetted output or a more vetted output. Technologies with generative AI, large language models, referred to LLMs, synthetic data, and digital twins. For those who've been hearing a lot about GPT, this is a type of large language model. It's one of those technologies that's known to be generative AI. But notice that the circles for the synthetic data and digital twins fall outside of generative AI and even AI bubble. This is many ways that GenAI creates synthetic or artificial data to create digital twins for simulations. So the other part of this is that fraudsters and unscrupulous taxpayers are now currently using generative AI techniques to synthesize identities. So we're seeing these synthetic identities created en masse. They are used to create legal or legitimate looking businesses and people. And it's important for tax agencies in particular to detect these false tax submissions and fake documentation, as the ramifications go far beyond refund fraud. Think about it. Once a tax ID is obtained, fraudsters can open bank accounts, conduct real-world transactions, and carry on money laundering at a large scale. So one of the greatest compliance challenges that tax agencies have ever faced. It's not just about a false tax return or an inflated refund request. Tax agencies can also use the same AI technologies to fight this fraud. So we'll go into that. There's a couple different methods, not just for fraud though, that can be, the generative AI can be used specifically for targeted education and taxpayer customer service. Chatbots are a really great example that are being utilized all over the world. We're seeing this as somebody types in a question and gets an answer. And as long as the generative AI output is pulling from vetted sources, so you're looking for policies, statutory requirements, publications that have already been approved by management and policy making outcomes will be put into the data sets to provide targeted education. And then, of course, the advanced threat simulation. GenAI can be used to simulate the tactics of known tax fraudsters, fraud trends. This way, the agency can stay ahead of evolving threats and develop more effective countermeasures. For example, GenAI can create synthetic tax returns with various fraudulent schemes to test the effectiveness of detection models. Anomaly detection, you can train GenAI to analyze vast amounts of data and identify unusual patterns that might indicate fraudulent activity. This could include inconsistencies between income reported and spending habits, identified through external data sources, unusually high deductions, sudden changes in filing patterns, etc. Synthetic data generation is an interesting part of GenAI for me. Fraud data or data about fraud is generally going to be a very small data set compared to the large population. In order to really understand where the trends are coming from, where fraud detection trends are needing to go, real life fraud trends that we're seeing in the world, and then make sure that we are using that synthetic data to train other AI models to identify red flags and patterns in real world returns. So that improves that detection accuracy without compromising taxpayer privacy. And then targeted audits and investigations, of course. By analyzing historical fraud patterns, GenAI can help the tax agency identify taxpayers with a higher risk of noncompliance. And this allows for a more strategic allocation of resources. So you're putting your highest value work in front of your highest value staff. So that's helpful. Alexander?
Yeah. So the how to create a robust and adaptable threat simulation environment for your tax agency. So let's define what would be the key pillars of the roadmap to create this robust and adaptable threat simulation environment for the tax agency. First of all, you need to define the scope and the goals, identifying the fraud schemes, start by outlining the specific tax fraud schemes you want to simulate. This could include synthetic identity fraud, income manipulation, phishing scams, and exploitation of tax codes, loopholes. Environment objectives define the goals of your simulation environment. Do you want to test the internal controls, train investigators, or develop proactive detection methods? That's the first pillar. The second is building the environment. So data acquisition, gather realistic tax data, including historical tax returns, public reports, and anonymized taxpayer information. It ensures compliance with data privacy regulations. Second is GenAI integration. In the environment, you need to utilize GenAI to create synthetic data that mimics the real-world fraud patterns. This could involve generating fake identities, income documents, and fraudulent tax returns. Consider these GenAI techniques. Generative adversarial networks, GANs, train two models, one to generate realistic data, and then another to discriminate between real and fake data. This iterative process refines the generation of increasingly realistic fraudulent scenarios. Secondly, auto-regressing model. These models predict the next element in a sequence, allowing them to generate realistic sequences of tax data that might reflect fraudulent activities. This is about the second building environment pillar. The third one would be simulation and analysis. So scenario development, develop simulation scenarios that incorporate GenAI, create fraudulent data alongside real data. These scenarios should test the ability of your system and staff to detect and respond to these sophisticated attacks. Attack simulation. So run simulation where the GenAI attacks your tax system, attempting to exploit vulnerabilities or bypass controls. Analyze how your system and staff perform in these simulated scenarios. This means a real new way of working. And as all we know, change management in tax administrations is a challenge to anticipate. Continuous improvement, of course, to refining your GenAI models based on the result of the simulations. Fraudsters techniques will evolve, so your simulations need to adapt as well. Analyze successful and unsuccessful attacks to identify weaknesses and improve your detection methods. Fourth pillar is security, compliance, and skill considerations. So security ensures your simulation environment is secure to prevent accidental exposure of sensitive data, implement robust access controls and data encryption practices. Explainability. When using GenAI, strive for interpretable models. This allows you to understand how AI is generating fraudulent data and identity potential bias in its output. Even if it's difficult with GenAI, this is extremely important. Human expertise. While GenAI can create sophisticated attacks, human expertise remain crucial. Security analysts should review simulation results and develop strategies to counter the identified threats. This is what I wanted to share with you in this slide. So the next one is talking about the traditional AI that remains the main weapon against synthetic identities and GenAI fraud. Why is it the case? So it might be the best initial approach. Here is, for instance, the strength that we could imagine around the traditional AI that we are using for years now. First of all is explainability. Traditional AI decision-making process is often easier to understand. This transparency is crucial for auditors and helps maintain trust in the system. Second is focus and efficiency. Traditional AI excels in identifying well-defined red flags based on preset rules. This allows for efficiency filtering of large data sets and quick identification of low-hanging fruits. Data efficiency. Traditional AI models typically require less training data compared to GenAI. This can be advantageous in your agency as a limited data set of history fraud attempts. Fourth is maturity and ease of use. Traditional AI is a well-established technology with readily available tools and expertise. So, however, traditional AI also has limitations. Limited adaptability. Traditional AI struggle to identify novel and evolving fraud schemes that fall outside the predefined rules. Second is reliance on human expertise. Defining the targeting rules often requires tax experts, which can be time-consuming. Third is potential bias. Inherent biases in the data or chosen rules can lead to unfairly targeting certain groups. So GenAI, on the other hand, excels in these areas. Pattern discovery. GenAI can uncover a hidden pattern and anomalies in vast amount of data, potentially identifying complex fraud schemes. Adaptability. GenAI models can continuously learn and improve as new data becomes available. So these two angles are extremely beneficial for GenAI. Although it has drawbacks like black box effects, data dependency, GenAI relies heavily on large amounts of high quality data to function effectively. So generally you prepare the data with traditional AI and then you use it, you operate it with GenAI. Potential for bias. Bias is the training data can be amplified by GenAI model. So you have a big attention here. And computational costs. Training and running complex GenAI models can be resource intensive. So therefore, the best approach involves a combination of both. Starting with traditional AI, leveraging its explainability, efficiency to identify clear red flags and low-risk cases, and refine it with GenAI using to analyze the remaining data and uncover complex patterns and anomalies that traditional AI miss. So maintaining human monitoring, ensure human auditors have the final say and can address any unexplained GenAI recommendation. In conclusion, while GenAI offers exciting possibilities, traditional AI remains a valuable tool for tax agency due to its explainability, efficiency, and well-established nature.
Absolutely. Thank you, Alexander. So, yeah, case in point on a lot of these, there was a recent post on LinkedIn that came out with ChatGPT asking, answering how many R's are there in strawberry? And the answer was 2. Are you sure? No, you're right. There are 3. Are you sure? Count again. No, you're right. There are 2. So my point to that story is that ChatGPT and our large language model, generative AI, is going to be determined on the input data in order to have a valid output. And so we need to ensure that, especially as regulatory agencies, that we are only using vetted sources for output when we're doing generative AI. Traditional AI remains that best weapon. to initially go through the screening, but specifically for fraud detection and simulation on trends that are coming down the pike, GenAI is where it's at, because you can predict what may be coming on a large scale in mass. Alexander, did you want to take this one? I'm sorry, you had your notes on here. Go ahead.
No problem. Yeah, I'm back. Sorry, I was on mute. Yes, absolutely. So GenAI, you spoke about anomaly detection. So in essence, GenAI augments traditional anomaly detection by enriching training data, provides a broader range of what could be wrong, scenarios for traditional AI to learn from. The second is simulating evolving threats, helps identifying anomalies based on potential future fraud tactics, not just past ones. So there's a discussion we can have in describing traditional anomaly detection versus generative AI anomaly detection. So in traditional AI, typically it relies on historical data to define normal patterns. It then flags anything that deviates significantly from these patterns as anomalies. This can be effective, but it might struggle with limited data if the agency has a limited data set of fraudulent cases, and traditional AI might not have enough information to learn effective detection patterns. And novel fraud schemes, new and unseen fraudulent activities might not be identified because they haven't shown in the past data. So GenAI anomaly detection offers a different approach, simulating new threats. GenAI can be used to create synthetic scenarios based on evolving fraud tactics. This helps traditional AI models stay ahead on the curve and identify anomalies that might not exist in historical data. Synthetic data generation, GenAI can create realistic but anonymized sometimes examples of fraudulent tax returns. This expands the training data available to traditional AI models, allowing them to learn a wider range of potential fraud patterns. Let's move into the synthetic data generation. So the traditional AI typically wouldn't be used for directly generating synthetic data in the way GenAI does. However, traditional AI can still play a valuable supporting role in the synthetic data generation process. So traditional AI role in synthetic data generation is based on three main areas. First is data pre-processing and cleaning. Traditional AI techniques like statistical analysis, rule-based algorithms can be used to clean and prepare real world before feeding it into GenAI models. This ensures the quality and consistency of the data used to train the generative models, leading to more realistic synthetic data. Second, feature engineering. Traditional AI can help identify and extract relevant features from the real-world data. These features then become the building blocks of for GenAI models to learn from and use when generating synthetic data. And then data validation. After GenAI creates synthetic data, traditional AI can be used to validate its quality. This might involve checking for statistical consistency with the original data or identifying any anomalies in the synthetic data itself. So avoiding bias and dependencies. That's it. Thank you, Taya.
Okay, thanks, Alexander. So to bring back your point, as far as with generative AI providing that fraud detection before it becomes problematic trends that are actually hitting, that's a predictive type that only can really be understood using the historical AI, historical and traditional AI to do the fraud detection, in addition to the generative AI that will assume all of the historical data and historical trends, and then predict new and upcoming attack potentials. So as we're going into that, I'm going to bring up ChatGPT and just do a couple little things here. So fraud, it's great. As an investigator, it's always interesting. So I want to create a sample return. Let's say that I live in Washington State, work as an IT consultant. Tax year is 2023. Can you guys see my screen? Make sure. I think so. All right. So I want to make sure that Bernie makes me a refund of $44,000. And let's see what it generates. Sure, yeah, we can do that. Absolutely. Imagine this on a massive scale, and it's continually learning. So as we move forward with detection, we're going to look for the traditional anomalies that we normally would using traditional artificial intelligence, traditional analytics, to really understand where the outliers are, to understand what should be there and what should not be there. So all of a sudden, it's in tabular format. We are seeing this on a massive scale all over the world, specifically for synthetic ID generation. And with that, as soon as the tax return or tax ID becomes available to that synthetic identity, they can open the bank accounts, they can create money laundering, pass-through entities, VAT, carousel fraud, sales tax fraud, just assets, hide use tax, hide business activity. And here's, I'm going to ask them to create 5 more records and use Alexander Nagati as the tax preparer. Thanks, Alexander.
Thank you, Taya.
So, and then from here, after we create 5 normal sounding names with general taxable income, standard deduction, itemized deductions, I've done this. You can create registrations for businesses in various jurisdictions, and it will populate addresses, made up social security numbers. And unless you are using both traditional AI and generative AI, you won't necessarily have a full idea of the scope and ability to detect these types of massive registrations, filings, refund requests on a massive scale. So those are for individuals. I'm getting some feedback here. It's interesting that we've got so many different types of filings, of registrations, and of course I can ask it for any output for a refund, including, let's just ask it for a basic corporate income tax return and Schedule C for Nagati Tax Service. Average income for a tax preparer. Please itemize the deductions and amounts common for tax preparers and calculate all tax due with a resulting refund of $6,700. Certainly. My point to all of this is that this is happening now. We are seeing this happen across the globe on a massive scale. And in order to detect it and stop refunds from going out, fraud on network, it used to be that it was a very manual process, that fraud was a network of organized thoughts, and detection could be done based on basic anomalies, and it's not the case anymore. We have to use both traditional AI and advanced analytics to really understand where the outliers are, but then we also need to understand what is publicly available for fraud to be committed, and use that as a training method for our own generative AI to use as detection methods to stop it from happening when it's happening within our agencies. This is kind of mind-boggling, and think of this on thousands and thousands of returns happening at the same time, or registrations, etc. It becomes problematic. So the best approach to stop that fraud is to use that traditional AI with anomaly detection, fraud network detection, analytics that will show what's the point of sale ratios for credit and cash transactions for businesses would be within a geographical area, within a specific demographic, NAICS code, subset of activity within a business. All of that is traditional AI. That's normal anomaly detection, that's normal audit selection and investigation case selection. So if we're going to really understand how to train our models, though, we need to look at what is available en masse to the public and what they're going to be trying to do to circumvent all of our safeguards that have traditionally been appropriate, because the machine learning will automatically use a brute force attack to understand what has worked and what won't work, and then they will adjust that with generative AI to ensure that it works again. And the more gates that they can get through, the more that learns, and the better that Gen AI will learn to circumvent that traditional AI safeguards that we already have in place. So as we're looking at what to do from here forward, it's important that we understand both the capabilities as well as its limitations. The tax returns could have been improved, that ChatGPT just created. They could have been improved with different prompts, but this is just a short period of time to do this in. So anyway, just something to keep in mind. And as we go forward, the roadmap, AI governance is huge. We're seeing this happen in Canada, United States, Finland, EU countries, of course. OECD is huge in making sure that there's a global policy with artificial intelligence, specifically around generative AI and how this is being used in regulatory agencies. And so we are seeing really good best practices being developed, and lawmakers and policymakers are being very proactive as much as possible in order to ensure that our policies are up to date and that we're aligning correctly across the globe, because it's no longer a local economy. We are looking at a global citizenship. We really are. And so in order to ensure that we are detecting fraud on a global scale that happens, or also ensuring that we're being responsible with our taxpayer services, our outreach, our education, to make sure that we are using generative AI to encourage voluntary compliance. Um, all of that needs to come down to an AI governance solution. It needs to provide an integrated ecosystem, and we need to have policies and regulations in place, both globally, locally, regionally, and also at a policy level within our own agencies. And that requires making sure that we have employee development so that they know what they can and cannot do, what sources of information are being used for generative AI to provide a good output, that they can trust that output because they know what the input is for those data sets in order to, make this new created answer to questions that taxpayers will have coming in. It's also about gaining buy-in from your staff to ensure that they know that they're not being replaced. The human element in all of this is so imperative. It's absolute. It has to be the focus. So on that, trustworthy AI. We've talked about responsible AI, but it's also about trustworthy AI. And specifically within the Gen AI space, the subset of traditional AI that, we've got a lot that has already been vetted, that we have trust in our traditional techniques for artificial intelligence. We know that machine learning works. We know that advanced analytics works. We can tell all of those things. Generative AI is new. It's a bit scary. People think that they're being replaced. The whole Skylink thing. It's some things are a little frightening. Trustworthy AI goes beyond just looking at the data sets. It's being really intentional about the inputs and the outputs. This intentionality actually permeates the entire development and deployment process. It ensures that we're developing our technologies and our methodologies in a very ethical manner. Not just could we do this, but should we do this? And that's a really key question. Should we do this? The other part of this is making sure that it doesn't harm people. And there's a question in the chat here, and we'll get to questions at the end here as well. But mitigating bias, and bias is not just about gender, demographic, race, age, etc. It also looks at the bias detection and mitigation in a very transparent way, because our historical data models have been developed using historical methods. It's not just what has been detected in the past, what fraud trends have happened in the past, but that bias can also be mitigated to ensure that we're not just looking at what has happened. We are looking at what is happening and what could happen in the future. And so that's something that the bias detection and mitigation models are very important to that model risk lifecycle, so that it's not retraining itself on bad data. And so that's a huge part of something that can be mitigated. Instead of having a black box, as regulatory agencies, you need to have control over your data, and that makes it imperative that you know what's going into it. You're able to detect that bias, you're able to mitigate that bias, and so you have full transparency on why decisions were made within the advanced analytics process, within the traditional AI process, within the generative AI process. All of that requires transparency and understanding what data you have access to, what data is going into the models, and what the output actually is comprised of. And so that's huge. And the other part of this, and probably the biggest part, is that building artificial intelligence has to reflect our values as a society. And the part of that, it's as our values morph and change, and we become better at what we do as regulatory agencies, as fraud investigators, that has to be adjustable within parameters, and we cannot let it reduce our effectiveness as human beings. And so that's really huge. So my point. All right. Alexander, you want to take this one? I've been talking a minute. Oh, are you on mute? Okay, so when Alexander comes back, I know he wants to talk about this a little bit, but the AI governance is, I spoke about this a little bit, but
I'm back, sorry.
Oh, hey, Alexander. So yeah, I was just going to talk about the model cards and how that actually looks for understanding what the recipe is that goes into a specific data model.
Yeah, what we talk about here is the fact that an AI governance solution should provide an integrated ecosystem that provides a comprehensive model risk lifecycle management and end-to-end traceability. So an AI governance solution should provide comprehensive model risk lifecycle management, improving operational efficiency, facilitating continuous improvements, and supporting ethical AI development, and also enhancing security. And these factors collectively contribute to the responsible and effective use of AI within the organization, building trust and ensuring long-term success. But moving into the process in the model management that we can see here, which is quite clear with two main functions. You have the administrative functions and support functions. You need to understand what's behind that. What are the main tools? What are they for? So behind that, you have the executive reporting, which is a dashboard with easy to analyze KPIs, providing an aggregate view on how an organization is effectively managing risk. That enables you to see the models in production, the models in use, and their risk classification. The risk is distributed also by department, by geographies, when it's delocated, the model performance, and often open findings, and their severity level. So that's something extremely valuable. The second is that you have model cards that are also multiple dashboards dedicated to model managers, enabling to improve insight into model performance. It will contain information about the model risk status across the organization. It enables you to have immediately the failure risk of your model. You can browse the detail of the model usage, the data summary, the model loaded, etc. And this leads to the management of the workflow, the model workflow. It enforces consistent model risk policy through workflow controlled processes. Workflow supports the full life cycle, including the development. You have the documentation, of course, and roles, delegations, approvals, rejections, etc. And all that enables the authority to have a consistent AI model management system.
Okay, excellent.
Yeah,
to bring this back, the user on role management and understanding where all of the document management, workflow management, all of that comes into play with where is the best place to put resources. And a lot of that can be understood through GenAI and understanding what questions are coming into the call centers, what questions are being put into the chat. In addition, what are the main points of problems that we're seeing on tax returns that are not necessarily fraud? They're just a lack of education. So that's huge. And then understanding all of the models that are currently there. We've got a question in there regarding, do you not check the validity of taxpayer details? And absolutely. And part of that comes from where these models come in, where the advanced analytics come in, where that traditional AI would be effective instead of generative AI. So, but within all of that, the model cards, the understanding what goes into that recipe for a data model, for an analytics model, and understanding why the output is what it is. And that's huge within the model management. So all of this is very applicable is my point on this. And then also you can truly understand where the next best action would be for a specific case based on predicted resolution and what will compel that. Or if you need to just nudge the taxpayer to make the correct decision to be in voluntary compliance. So there's a lot of power knowing where the models come in, where those analysis come in, where it can be utilized to predict problems or resolutions as quickly as possible. So again, the roadmap to using generative AI. The employee development is huge. Of course, it's all about people, always. And then continually learning. Responsible AI and governance is going to be an ongoing process. It's going to need to morph and change as we see new trends, as Gen AI within the public space and in the regulatory space learns and grows and becomes better. All of these need to be a very fluid process. So communications and transparency is also huge, not only with our constituents and our citizens, but with our internal divisions, within our frontline staff, within executive, within our lawmakers. All of those communications are huge so that there's not this fear that is unfounded, but it is a prudent understanding of its limitations and its capabilities. And to do that requires transparency, both internal and external. Why are we using Gen AI? Why are we using traditional AI? Where is the cutoff? What are the data sources that are going into the outputs to generate the outputs? And to avoid those hallucinations that can happen with Gen AI. And so that requires a governance that is very, very robust, specifically for our regulatory agencies. But it also comes down to understanding what is publicly available and what types of fraud will be generated or could be generated based on large language models, based on available data that has been traditionally put out into the universe, that is available for public consumption, and that can generate new content based on historical outputs that have been just allowed, whether that's free web, dark web, etc. So, Alexander, what are your wrap-up thoughts on all of this too?
Yes, my thought is really very simple. A few years ago, I would say 3 to 4 years ago, many tax agencies have put in place a data governance that took them between 1 year and a half and 2 years to be set up, just to build it and to put that in place with the organizations and the processes, especially on communicating and educating the whole administration. And if we see that in the data space, when we think about AI, when you think about an AI governance, it becomes much more complex because more technical, and then you have to imagine a different type of skills, of course, and different levels of communications to explain also what is behind the techniques. And that's something not easy, because the change management will refer to different layers, as you said, of HR, and also a kind of policy that has to be not just imagined, but followed up and evolving throughout the whole organization. So that's a huge program that is coming for all tax administrations. And you can also imagine, even if most of them are already using GenAI, but and more AI, traditional AI, I mean, the governance is not there. Many tax agencies are trying to hire chief AI officers to put in place a real structure. And that's the real future. So we are probably going to a new era, and the next years will be fantastically interesting for all of us, definitely. That's my
Absolutely.
word, Diane.
Thank you. Alexander, we've got a couple of questions here. I'm going to go to the next slide. You guys can definitely take a look at that QR code, which is a legitimate QR code. It's not a restaurant menu. So yeah, go ahead and use that one. And then there's, of course, contact information on feel free to reach out to us. We're both on LinkedIn. There are some questions that we'd like to address. So
I can pick up one if you.
Well, the most recent one here is.
Okay, sorry.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. Yeah, sorry for that.
So how can machine learning be used to improve revenue collection, which is ultimately what all tax administrators are seeking to embed? My focus is on the illicit economy, where data sets are not easily available. So that's a near and dear to my heart as an investigator and tax fraud investigator. It's a matter of understanding where your data sets or where you're looking at. So often, the symptom is going to show what the sickness is, and you can look at if here's a case in point, really easy. If we've got somebody reporting $40,000 in income for the year, but they've got registrations for a couple Harleys, a yacht, whatever, might be worth taking a look at. The other part of it is that we've got a lot of gig economy reports coming in with the DAC rules in the EU. That's also been much easier to detect. With the reports for like Venmo and PayPal, et cetera, now coming in for the United States and Europe, we've got abilities to look at not just the income tax portion of that, but the sales tax portion of that. A lot of that illicit economy will be reported somehow, whether that's through blockchain stuff that's, still regulations are coming down the pike. They're still in works, so we're waiting on some of that. But lifestyle audits are always a point of discussion, whether or not that's appropriate to look at what, toys people are buying. But again, I'm a firm believer that the symptom is going to show if there's a sickness. And so we work backwards from people's assets and that don't align with what has been reported as an income, which often means that there's an underground economy there that is going to show other things. The other part of that is analyzing local permitting. If it's a brick and mortar spot, you've got a fire inspection for the fire marshal, you've got health inspections from your Department of Health for restaurants, etc. Use the resources that you have and the shared information agreements that you have access to, and you can put that into data sets and put that into advanced analytics and really understand what is registered, what has been reported, and what has not been, what is completely under the carpet. And that's how I would approach that. Alexander, you had another question or to answer? Go ahead.
Yeah. For instance, question 4. So if the source data has to be cleaned, deducted, the RAG will be expensive. Yes, of course, it will be expensive, but you have to have a strategy to mitigate the costs. And when you do you have to automate, for instance, as much as possible to leverage the data cleaning data cleaning tools with automation capabilities to handle repetitive tasks. You have also to prioritize data quality, so invest in data governance processes, and we talked about it just a few minutes ago, to ensure that data is entered accurately from the start. And also you have to focus on data fields that are the most crucial and not all of them. So if you do these approaches, you can really mitigate the costs and have a good investment in the use of traditional AI with GenAI. That's for question number 4. Yeah.
All right. We've got another one that's also good, and it has nothing to do with fraud. It has to do with knowledge retention and asset retention within an agency. And that's how do you enable the workforce to operate in alignment with new tech? And I will say that the historical traditional AI is great for knowledge retention. And the generative AI, as long as it's been curated responsibly from that historical data, that can be used as a teaching tool, and not just for turnover with staff and retirements, and we're losing so many like really amazing knowledge-based assets that are just leaving for various reasons. And so that turnover and the attrition that we're seeing can have some solutions with AI being used to not just retain information when someone leaves, but also generate new information based on that historical information. And I will put that caveat in there, as long as it has been vetted. And that's huge when we're talking about Gen AI. And it comes down to trust. All of this comes down to trust and transparency. And so when we're getting buy-in from our staff, it is imperative that they understand what goes into these algorithms, what goes into that artificial intelligence to provide an output that they can trust. That goes for our staff, it goes for our executive, it goes for our lawmakers, and it goes for our citizens. And so that's what I would leave you with, is that transparency and that understanding of why it has to be human-centric. Everything that we do within data, within artificial intelligence, has to remain human-centric. And so with that, please contact us, keep in touch, and we will follow up.